Welcome, everybody. A little late. We planned for the first show of 2025 to be at 9 o'clock. And, of course, my computer chose 8:55 as the first time to have computer problems. But here we are nonetheless. It is the maiden voyage of 2025 of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. And once again this season, it'll be Zack Meisel and myself. Zack, you have more children than the last time. Well, maybe not the last time we spoke to you, but the last Guardian season. Does having an added child make you more or less excited about the upcoming season?
It depends on the hour. Hey, look. Someone had to make some roster additions in this town, right? There it is.
That's right. That was good. That was a good pull by you. All right, a lot to get to today. CC Sabathia gets into the Hall of Fame. Who could be next for the Guardians/Indians? But we're going to spend most of today's show looking back at what the Guardians did and didn't do and what they still might do here in the next 3 weeks or so before spring training begins. Not that you'd have to stop making moves at that point, but we shall see. That's all coming up on today's Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. And I'm stalling to find the open, and there it is. This is spring training for me too. I'm a little rusty right now, getting everything going here. But all right, Zack, it's been an interesting offseason. One of the other things I do want to talk about for a couple of minutes before or after we start with the Guardians is, this Dodgers offseason and what that might lead to in terms of the next collective bargaining agreement. But let's begin with what the Guardians did and didn't do. Just a quick recap, and I know we did do one show before the end of last year, but here's what the Guardians did in case you missed it. If you're more of a casual fan and you're not following every last move, the Guardians have made 4 trades this offseason that involved at least one major leaguer. They traded Eli Morgan to the Cubs for a minor leaguer. They traded Andres Jimenez, of course, in a big 3-team deal with the Blue Jays and Pirates, in which they got the starting pitcher Luis Ortiz from the Pirates and 3 minor leaguers, 1 from Toronto, 2 from Pittsburgh. They, of course, traded their second best offensive player, Josh Naylor, to Arizona for a young prospect pitcher who has spent time in the big leagues in Slade Ciccone. And of course, this trade doesn't really include a major leaguer, but I gotta mention it anyway. Miles Straw traded to the Blue Jays for a bag of donuts. In terms of free agency, the Guardians signed 3 players this offseason. They re-signed Shane Bieber, 1 year with a 1-year option. They signed Carlos Santana. They signed Paul Sewald. That was their most recent move. As part of that move, they DFA'd Pedro Avila, who was pretty solid last year at the as one of the last relievers in the pen. That's the overview, Zack, and they still could do something, I guess. But what's your thoughts on the overview of this offseason so far?
So I was sketching out my first roster projection for opening day and trying to map out what does this look like. And you know who the catcher is, Bo Naylor. And I think there's not much you can say about him other than they need him to have a breakout year.
That's correct.
Jose Ramirez will be at third. Brian Rocchio will be at second or short. Sure. Carlos Santana and Kyle Manzardo will occupy first base and DH. Steven Kwan's in left. Lane Thomas is in center. Second base and right field, no clue. But even in those names I mentioned, Bo Naylor, huge question mark. Brian Rocchio, huge question mark. Kyle Manzardo, I think he's going to hit, but there are questions about him. Carlos Santana's 39 years old.
Yeah.
Lane Thomas has shown flashes of being like an all-star caliber player, but he was not that in his time here last year. We have no idea what to make of Noel. Will Brennan, I feel like I've seen what he is. The second base options, I like Juan Brito. I don't know if he's going to be the guy opening day and just play every day at second base. They did not get the bat that I thought they needed. And I thought they needed 2 of them. And I just sit here and you read through their moves and we had a press conference with Stephen Vogt on Monday just to catch up before spring training. And I sat there at one point and I'm thinking, if I knew nothing about last year, like if I've been in a coma for a few years and I just came to this press conference and listened to this guy talk, I would think that this team's in a rebuild. Like it was all about, well, this guy's really young and we hope he can develop and like we like the path that he's on and I know how this team operates and I understand, we can yell about payroll if we want. Like I'm happy to do it. I feel like I've been doing it for 6 months or 16 years, but it's just strange to me how the season you had, you had best attendance you've had in years, and you just don't build off that. And you can talk me into liking the moves in terms of how maybe they set up the future, like Luis Ortiz. That's I like him. Saccone is interesting. They love his arm. You saved money in many of these deals.
Yeah.
I don't care about that.
I know.
Like, I do give you kudos for trading Miles Straw and getting out from that contract, but who gave him the contract?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's same thing with Jimenez. It is a very, just a very meh offseason. And in a normal year, I might be able to say, it's fine. Okay. I understand what you're doing and I get it. But not after the year you just had when you were in first place all season. Like, it's not like it was some mirage that you got to the Final Four. And the fans bought in and you just did nothing to keep that momentum going. And it's just like I'm not surprised by it. Like I know
How could you be?
I know how this organization operates at this point. I also know the state of MLB and just how ridiculous everything is. Like they're not the only team that had an offseason like this, but they're the only team that made the Final Four and had an offseason like this. So it's disappointing. Like I hear from fans daily who are like, please tell me there's another move coming. Like, please tell me they have an ace up their sleeve. And no, there's no ace up their sleeve. There's like 3 possible jacks in 4 years if they develop right.
So much to follow up off of what you said. I'm going to leave the pitching for later because you mostly focused on the lineup and not following up on last year. And I want to start with that part because I've been here long enough. Some people, jerks, like to remind, oh, you're not from here. You know what? I've lived here a long time now, and I'm probably going to live at least maybe the rest of my life in Cleveland, likely. So I'm part of the community. I'm ingrained in this community. I understand how things work here. And I believe, we all know that it's a football town. Nobody's going to argue that. But, Zach, I believe to my core, whenever it gets brought up when the Indians had all those consecutive sellouts, it's always, some of that time the Browns weren't here, blah, blah. Okay, make all excuses you want. I believe, especially now that the stadium is smaller, that if the Guardians had I'll say $160 million payroll, and they were consistently having good off seasons and adding good players and doing that with the great infrastructure in the front office they have, I believe the Guardians would sell, even if they didn't sell out every game, they'd have fantastic attendance, way better. Like they'd consistently have good attendance, not be near the bottom. I'm not blaming the fans for if the attendance goes down this year, that's on the Guardians. That's not on the fans. You're 100% right. Last year, the fans not only bought in and went to games, they bought in early. When it even though the team was good, you could have made a lot of arguments that it was a house of cards. And it turned out not to be. They ended up being a good team. But I'll tell you this lineup on paper, and I get it, the Guardians lose the offseason every year. And more often than not, they end up being at least competitive in the regular season. So who knows? Maybe the same thing will happen. But this lineup on paper, all due respect to the White Sox. Well, we'll have to put the outside of the White Sox, could end up being the second worst lineup in baseball or one of the worst lineups in baseball. I think there's a lot of people that think, well, this young player was okay last year. Baseball is the hardest sport to predict. Great players, good players in basketball and football rarely have a bad season in their prime unless they're hurt. It happens, but it's very uncommon unless a guy is hurt. In baseball, it happens all the time. All the time. You see a guy who, Cody Bellinger, I'll throw the first name popped in my head. The guy was rookie of the year, was an MVP. And now the Cubs had to give him away to the Yankees to just take his contract. The Cubs, which is a big market team. That's how things happen in baseball, and that's not unusual. So I look at this lineup, and I'm like, okay, Ramirez is great. Kwan is very good. My second best hitter is Kwan, who's, okay, good hitter, is little power, and he's my second best hitter. My third best hitter is probably Carlos Santana, who's almost 40. And listen, he was still good last year, but he could easily, and I love Carlos, and I'm sure you love him, but he could easily go off a cliff. Everybody else is a massive question mark. I trust Lane Thomas against lefties. I think, we know he's going to hit well against lefties. I don't trust him against righties, and I don't trust anybody else that does. Listen, I get it. Rocchio has talent. Some of the guys they're considering at second base have talent. Certainly, we could see Chase DeLauder at some point in the outfield. Kyle Manzardo has a lot. I get it, but to expect them all to come through is unrealistic. And just like you're hoping all could come through, what if none of them come through? If none of them come through, this lineup's horrible. Horrible. Give me, besides Jose Ramirez, is there a player you're absolutely sure will hit 20 home runs this year?
Manzardo would probably be the closest thing I could say, but am I 100% sure? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I actually think Kwan, I think he could be like, you have like your MVP candidates, Judge,
Right.
Ramirez, Gunnar Henderson. I think Kwan can be the tier below that because we saw he hit for some power last year and didn't sacrifice the contact. And I wonder his swoon in September there, I wonder how much of that was injury related.
Yeah.
Because he looked great in the playoffs again.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're betting on everybody reaching their ideal scenario here.
Right.
And that's such a risky game to play. And it's not one you should have to play when you're on the doorstep of the World Series. And look, I know people are going to yell, well, the TV deal. You know what?
That's bullshit.
I know that they're going to make less on their TV deal this year, but they acted like they were making less every year for the last 5 years. They didn't do anything a year ago in the offseason because they weren't sure if they were going to go back to Bally's or they were going to go to MLB. They stuck with Bally's. They didn't make 100% of what they normally make, but they made pretty close to it. And so they pocketed all of that.
That's right.
So then why, after a season you just had, why can't you get uncomfortable? Like, I don't get it. And I don't, like, I'm so tired of the ownership conversation and just yelling, but they don't give people a reason to talk about any other narrative.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I just don't get it. I don't get what we're doing here. It's you're going on 77 years since you won a World Series and you get this close. And if you're an owner and you're Clevelanders and you wanted to buy the team because you're Clevelanders and you have passion for the franchise. And I've gone on the same rant on the same podcast before. And you're only going to own the team for a couple more years. Like, why would you not try to leave your mark? Why would you not try to do whatever you can do to make it happen when you get this close? I don't get it.
It's stunning. It's frustrating.
And the other side of this is that we can yell and rant and all that stuff. And odds are they're going to find a way to squeeze as much out of the talent that they have. And it'll result in like 88 wins and a division title. And, it makes you have to have a more nuanced argument than just yelling about being cheap.
Sure. And the problem is, and why that might not happen, and I'm not ready to say it won't, but this division's better.
Mm-hmm.
The Royals and Tigers, I think, are just getting started. I mean, they've got young talent. The Tigers have a lot of good young pitchers. And the frustrating thing is this is the only division in baseball. And I get teams like the Twins and used to be the Tigers, not as much. At times the White Sox, not right now, will spend more than the Guardians, but there's not one big spender in this division where you're like, we can't keep up with that team.
These teams haven't done, like, I thought the Tigers would make a splashy move. They should go get Alex Bregman. The Royals should try to improve on the margins if they can.
Right.
I've been surprised by that too. And so then again, the Guardians aren't the only team operating this way, but that's not an excuse.
No, yeah, sure. There's other fan bases that are really pissed off right now, sure. But speaking of which, well, you know what? Let's just get to the pitching first. Now, by the way, not only is the lineup worse, but the defense is worse and I didn't have a problem trading Andres Jimenez, and that trade may turn out to be really good in the future because we were talking about his contract wasn't looking good since he hadn't hit since that year. But the problem is, as we said, it's like some of these trades are all about saving money, not about getting better. That's what's frustrating. And Andres, you just weakened yourself from the best defensive second baseman to we'll see. So you're not better on offense and you're not better on defense. But on the pitching side, go ahead. You want to?
Well, no, I was going to say, and you saved money with Jimenez.
Yeah.
You saved money for about 10 minutes with Josh Naylor, and then you spent it on Carlos Santana. But you think about Jimenez was going to make $10.5 million, Naylor a little shy of $11 million. You moved Straw's money. That was like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
You can get a pretty good player for all that, but they spent it on Santana and Sewald and
and Bieber was going to miss half the season at least. The Sewald thing, well, first of all, now pitching-wise, I don't think they've taken a step back necessarily. I do like Luis Ortiz. The bullpen is probably equal, maybe even a pinch better. I mean, Sewald's been a really good reliever in the league for a long time. But what I want to talk to you about specifically is this idea that the Sewald signing is a precursor for trading one of their other relievers. Do you believe that?
It's not impossible, but I don't get that vibe.
Okay.
I think they like Sewald. Vogt they cross paths in Seattle.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I do think that they're a little nervous about some regression. I mean, there's going to be some regression. Like you're not going to have those 4 guys with ERAs under 2 again.
That's right.
And I think there's a little concern with just the workload. That was the first time Cade Smith had been in the big leagues. It was the first time Hunter Gaddis had been a reliever. It was the first time Tim Herron spent an entire season in the majors. And then these guys pitched till October 19th. And in the playoffs, they were pitching every single game. So like they're going to bring them along slowly. But I also think you just have to assume that, one of those guys will have an ERA of 4 and one of them, you want to safeguard against that. So I think with Sewald, it was, they know him. They already, what did they sign him like 5 days ago? And they already, one of the pitching guys already sent over like some video and they started conferencing about tweaks to make to the delivery to get back to what he was from 21 to 23. So I think they like the guy.
Yeah.
Really good in the clubhouse, known for having a great personality and all that. So, they were targeting the relief market for a couple weeks there. Like I know they liked Andrew Kittredge, who signed with Baltimore. So I think of it more as just they wanted a stable, like the Scott Barlow move. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
But I think this is kind of like that. The difference is they were penciling in Barlow basically to be the 8th inning guy.
Yeah.
Before they knew Cade Smith and Tim Herron and Hunter Gaddis could be capable.
Right. Yeah.
And this time, that those guys have what it takes. So you're not asking Sewald to be more than, your 4th or 5th best reliever.
I also wonder if they do stay pat as is, if Emmanuel Clase was hurt, let's say he went on the IR, if you would make Sewald the closer and not have to change the roles of the other guys since he has that experience.
Yeah, and like the thing is, what would a reliever trade be? Like how much do you really like? The guy I think people would move would be Gaddis, right? Because Clase and Smith, they're just too filthy.
Yeah.
What could Gaddis get you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I would listen to a Clase trade if I were the Guardians and I got overwhelmed. I would listen to it. I don't know what Gaddis. At first I was thinking maybe a Cubs Guardians trade could work out but then the Cubs traded for Ryan Presley, so probably not now. But because the Cubs have a lot of outfielders. I thought that could be a match there. But, yeah, you're not getting a proven major league hitter for Hunter Gaddis.
Right.
And that's what
So,
they need.
and I think even with some regression, like the bullpen should still be the team's strength.
Yes.
And there's so many question marks in the rotation. Although
Right.
I think the rotation can be better. It should be better. You're not going to have Carlos Carrasco in your rotation for half the season.
Right.
You get Bieber back. But that said, like there's still, I have no idea what to make of Tristan McKenzie. I have no idea what to make of Gavin Williams, Ben Lively, Joey Cantillo. Like there's a lot of question marks there too. So having that stable bullpen, having a deep bullpen, Andrew Walters has like closer stuff. And he was a second round pick and he moved through the system really fast. And we got a brief glimpse of him last year. And he's going to have to fight for a job in spring training and then wind up being like the 6th reliever in the pecking order. Like that's a good spot to be in.
I just don't. I'm looking for a way for them to get another hitter. And you're right. They need to. You'd like to see them have acquired. Like I said earlier in the offseason, I know he's not a perfect player, but like I was saying, why didn't the Guardians sign Gleyber Torres? I mean, he signed what, a 1-year deal, or it wasn't that much money.
And 1 for 15.
Yeah, like why couldn't they have done something like that? He'd honestly be their at worst 3rd best hitter at worst. I mean, I know he has flaws in his game, but okay, not everybody's. You got a lot of hitters. We know he can hit. I mean, he was clutch for them in the playoffs. He hit at the end of the year. It's like, why not make a move like that for a year? He's not, and it's not a guy who's 35 years old. It's a guy who's still in his prime, but you can get him for a year because he's a flawed player. So let's see what he's got. But
I'll tell you what I'm not going to do.
Yeah,
we are not talking Gabe Arias in February or March.
Oh my God.
Not doing it.
Not interested. I agree with you. All right. Want to hit a couple more things and we're running out of time here. We're going to say, let me do the Dodgers thing real quick because I saw a tweet from Ben Verlander, Justin's brother, who's in the media, and he said, for all the people complaining about the Dodgers and complaining about baseball, well, the Chiefs have gone to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. And I used to make the same argument, and I realize now that it's a completely flawed argument because, yes, I've always argued, well, there's been more different champions, but that's just because of the nature of baseball, not because baseball.
The Chiefs are in Kansas City.
Right. Exactly. And in football, it can happen with any team. In baseball, you're never going to have the Guardians, even if they do win a World Series at some point, they're never going to have a dynasty. They're never going to be a World Series team like what the Yankees were. Because the nature of the sport, it's harder, but also because they're not going to be able to keep that kind of team together, which you can in the NFL. Because if you have the quarterback, and in the NBA, if you have the superstar, I mean, look at the best teams in the NBA right now: the Cavs, Oklahoma City, small markets, because you could keep players. I know we're probably never going to have a cap in Major League Baseball, and I don't blame the Dodgers for this. The Dodgers are doing nothing wrong, but it's bad for the sport, or it's bad for the fans. It's bad for the fans that the Dodgers have a $400 million payroll and that some of their teams have a $100 million payroll. We get it. I don't think anybody's blaming the Dodgers, or at least I'm not. I don't think they're the bad guys here, but it's irrelevant who the bad guy is because it's bad for the fans.
Yeah, the equalizer is supposed to be the randomness of the postseason, but the Dodgers just proved that that's not the cure-all for this, right? So, yeah, I mean, you just had KC versus Buffalo in the AFC title game, and every single TV in America was tuned to it, right? But if you had Royals Rays in the ALCS, no one is paying any attention to it. So that's the toothpaste is out of the tube. I don't know how you fix it at this point. This is decades in the making because you have this disparity in TV deals and revenue, and you have small market owners who are going to cry poor because of it. And you have big market owners who are going to say, we're not going to agree to a centralized TV revenue system like the NFL has because we're making tons of money off of this. So I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah.
Everyone is to blame. The commissioner's to blame. The owners are to blame. The players are to blame because they look out for the Juan Sotos of the world to ensure that we don't want a salary cap. We want guys to be able to make 50, 60 million a year, and that's fine. But you give no voice to the guys, the vast majority of players who make their $700,000 a year on their league minimum deal, and then pray they can get to arbitration,
right?
So that they can actually have some income. So I don't know what the solution is. It sucks, right? Like I mean, they signed. Did anyone even realize that they signed Kirby Yates, by the way, who had an incredible year last year?
Yeah, right.
It was the day after they signed Tanner Scott, which was the day
Right.
after they got Roki Sasaki. And if Kirby Yates signed in Cleveland, like there'd be a press conference, you'd get the manager and the GM, you'd get Yates on a call, they'd be promoting the hell out of it. And as they should, like it'd be a great move, right? And the Dodgers, it was just like a throwaway. Like no one even noticed because it's just how their offseason
it is insane. I'll tell you this. If you look at what the Dodgers projected AAA rotation is, it's probably better than half the teams in Major League Baseball. Now, it's potential because it's a lot of young guys who are not going to be able to make the team. But, guys like Dustin May coming off injury, Gavin Stone, Bobby Miller. Maybe Bobby Miller's in their regular. But their number 5 starters, Tyler Glass now. The guy's an all-star. I mean, it's insane. But, all right, last thing before we wrap up here. CC Sabathia gets in the Hall of Fame. We're all excited about that. Of course, he was on UCSS the other day. It was great talking with him. Omar Vizquel still on the ballot. Kenny Lofton is now on I forget what they call the group. It used to be called the Veterans Committee. There's like 3 different committees now, but he's going to get
something eras.
Yeah. Right. The Legends era, whatever the hell it is. Kenny Lofton, obviously, Manny has the steroids. Albert Bell, everybody hates him, so he gets no traction. And beyond that, okay. But I who do you think? Is it Kenny Lofton? Is he the next likely guy? Because Vizquel's not getting in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lofton has a shot, and I think you'll see. There's always like a campaign effort, right?
Yes.
I remember Tim Raines, his last year on the ballot. There were people vouching for him and trying to spread the word, and Lofton's numbers actually are pretty similar to Tim Raines. It's actually it's a good comparison.
Yeah.
He got the shaft, and he's been outspoken about it. He landed on the ballot the same year as Bonds and McGuire and Sosa and those guys, and he got overshadowed. We were all having all this discourse about what to do with the steroid guys, and here's Kenny Lofton, who has a really, really compelling case. Maybe not even to be in the Hall of Fame, but to last longer than a year.
Sure.
And we never got to see it. And I think he gets dinged a little bit too because he played for so many teams. He was with Cleveland, and then the back half of his career, he was bouncing all over the place. He got traded midseason a few times, when in reality, his career went like that because teams valued him.
That's right.
He was in the postseason every year with the Yankees, the Phillies, the Cubs.
Yep.
Because teams wanted his speed and defense and ability to get on base. But I think it hurt him a little bit just because you look at his Baseball Reference page and it just looks like he's this nomad who is just bouncing all over the place trying to hang on. I think he could make it. It's impossible. Like the committees, it's 16 people. It's usually a mix of longtime players, coaches, Hall of Famers, and executives and a couple writers in there sometimes. And you never know what these guys are going to do. I mean, they've elected some people like Harold Baines and Ted Simmons and
Dave Parker,
guys like that. Yeah. So I think he has a good shot. I'll be curious to see what the push is like for him just publicly. Because if not, I think the answer is either Terry Francona or Jose Ramirez.
Yeah, which is a long way. Well, for Jose Ramirez, at least. Last thing, to your point, I would personally, if I had a vote, I'd vote Kenny Lofton in. And I think what you said puts him over the top. Because to me, you look statistically, I think he's a borderline candidate, right? But what put him over the top for me, and this is an intangible, is he was a winning player. And I don't know if there's not a number to quantify that with, but I believe he was a winning player. And long before I moved to Cleveland, I remember you referenced it before when the Cubs acquired him. And I remember the Cubs making the playoffs. And as a Cubs fan who had no ties to Kenny Lofton whatsoever, long before moving here, I was like, what a difference this guy makes. And I'm sure everywhere he went, the teams you mentioned, they felt the same way. Every fan base felt the same way. He wasn't warm and fuzzy with the media, which never helps, but that's stupid. That shouldn't count. But he was a great fielder. He was a great base runner. I think he's an equivalent player to Tim Raines, as you said, who got into the Hall of Fame, and I'm hopefully will. I know on those committees they are not going to put in the steroid guys because I think the former players are even more against, especially the guys, the older guys, are way more against the steroid guys than even the media are.
I also think when he played, we didn't appreciate the skill set.
That's right. That's
if he plays,
if
he plays in the 80s when stolen bases were like trendy, like that was cool. That's what guys did. Maybe he makes it. If he played now, I think he's a shoo-in.
100%.
But you look at what he brought to the table and like defense and center field, like the highlight reel catches that made the Sports Center top 10, those were cool. But just the ground he could cover and the fact that he led the league in stolen bases 5 straight years, but also, and he says this all the time, it's like he wasn't this dude who hit 250 with a 300 on base and like whenever he got on, he was stealing. He got on a ton. That's what allowed him to steal.
Yeah.
And he drew walks and he didn't strike out much. And like, he really was a well-rounded player. And I think he could get in, but it's a shame that it had to get to this point.
That's right.
He got 3% of the vote that
Ridiculous.
first year. It's just, makes us voters look bad. Like it's embarrassing.
It certainly does. Folks, this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, final thought. Zach, I know we wanted to be done at 9:30, but we had technical difficulties, and you got a baby to give a nap to. So, final thought.
No, I feel like this is the case every offseason where it's like you're kind of stumped why they didn't do a little bit more. And yet the countdown to spring training, we're 2-ish weeks away. And and even with the Dodgers like making 29 other fan bases a little dismayed here, it's like, well, it'll still be nice to have baseball in our lives, especially as it was a lousy football season. We've got the Cavs and they've certainly been fun to watch, but I like having the everydayness of baseball, and there's just so much to talk about, so much to digest in February and March as you get ready for a new season, and I feel like I'm well rested and ready to go.
That's right. I'm excited as well. As you say, as frustrated as we are with the Guardians in the offseason, they more often than not, give us fun and pleasure during the season, even though we're always frustrated and wanting them to do more. It is still possible they'll make a move, maybe nothing significant, but maybe something smaller that can help. We shall see. We will be on once. We were on once in January here at the end. We'll be once again in February, and then in March, starting. But once the season starts, we'll be on every day. So stay tuned. Look at social media for the next update. Before we go real quick, I got to tell you about one more thing. I got to tell you about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easier to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Who you got in the Super Bowl there, Zach? Who you picking?
I can't. I don't want to be that guy who's tired of the Chiefs, but I'm tired of the Chiefs. And
I am too.
Give me the Eagles, even
All
though I
right.
know it's a
I
loser of
know.
a bet.
I'm picking I'm picking the Chiefs to win, even though I want the Eagles to win. But and when are you heading to spring training?
In 2.5 weeks.
All right. Well, we'll talk next from Arizona, where you'll be warm, and we'll still be freezing our asses off. Until then, we'll talk to you next time on the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. All right. So much for 5:30. Sorry.